Welcome to the Change the Game podcast, where we are changing the game by doing business differently, and we're highlighting the stories of capitalism at its best. I'm Steve Baker, and with me as always is Rich Armstrong, president of the Great Game of Business and co-author of our new book, Get in the Game, How to Create Rapid Financial Results and Lasting Cultural Change. Hello, Rich.
Hello, Steve. How are you?
Doing good. I'm especially excited today because we have a very special guest. His name is Doug Austin, and Doug has been in the advertising world for a great many years. That sounded like too many years, didn't it, Doug?
Yeah.
He's been a guru in advertising and promotion and shopper and business-to-business food service ad agencies in New York, Dallas, and in Springfield, Missouri. In fact, he's probably one of the guys most responsible for making Springfield kind of the center of the food service advertising world. As he made his way through this agency career, Doug saw firsthand the effects of mergers and buyouts, sales, acquisitions, even ESOP transactions. So today he works with independent agencies and consumer brands and companies as a leader of Austin Amplifies. Doug Austin, how are you today?
Yes, I am wonderful and very happy to be here, and can't wait to just cut it up with you.
All right. Well, we're always having fun with you, Doug, and you've got such a great background. I didn't mean to make it seem like you had so many years in advertising, but let's just say so much depth. To start off with, I think anybody that's listening that knows something about you knows that you utilized the Great Game of Business to grow your last agency, the Marlin Network, which you were able to grow from $8 million and 57 people to 20 million and 157 people, 4 companies, 4 locations. Do I have all that right?
That's right. Yeah, we turned a single sort of boutique agency at the time with a grand reputation, which was why this was possible, into a network, a sort of a mini holding network, if you will. I always tell people it was just like Omnicom, except that instead of 80,000 people, we had 80 people. And we weren't 800 companies, we were 4. But the principle was the same. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, Doug. How are you?
Glad you're here. Good to see you.
Hey, even though a lot of people equate, GGOB with manufacturing, primarily due to the fact of, our parent company, SRC Holdings, and the original story, but in all reality, the majority of our practitioners are actually service companies. Mm-hmm. And what were some of the challenges of implementing GGOB in a professional services business?
Yeah, that's great. When I was first introduced to the whole theory of open book management, it came at a time when, as Steve had mentioned, we had 4 companies. 3 of them were advertising agencies. And so you'd have thought that we'd kind of had that dialed in and figured out and how to make money and do everything well or well enough, But as it turns out, advertising agencies are like restaurants. They all have their own personality, and it all depends on the head chef and all that kind of good stuff. So we had one that was a little challenged, shall we say, in terms of understanding that we were a for-profit entity and in fact needed to make money. And so we had to help them with that. And in a way that didn't their spin squash the creativity because they were super creative shop, we just were losing money. So, when I heard about this open book management, I thought, that's interesting. And, they're right here in town. And of course, Jack Stack has such a wonderful reputation and all the companies and SRC and all of that. And it just drew me in enough to say, I probably ought to look into this. And as I did, what I realized was we did some of that because we were a network and operating as a holding company. It was pretty transparent to begin with. And in terms of the financials and understanding and the back and forth, and we had a fantastic CFO at the time who was really ratcheted down on the numbers very well. So we understood it, but they didn't. And so we talked about it, and I said, think we can do this? Think we can do this deal and not literally freak everybody out? You guys, I would hear stuff like, Yeah, okay, so advertising agencies get this weird reputation, and to be honest, I leverage it when it's in my favor, and I debunk it when it's not. And so, but what you hear is like, "Oh, dude, I'm an art director. You can't expect me to understand the numbers." And I'm like, "Yes, I can, and yes, you will. And guess what? It's not going to hurt. It really won't. It's okay." And so we did. And so I mean, writers, art directors, everybody in a creative suite that you would imagine. And I was really kind of dreading it. I thought they were going to push back pretty hard, but as it turns out, they were pretty open to it because of the way that we introduced it. And the way that we introduced it was all the things I learned by attending the Teach the Teacher course, whatever it was called at the time. This was a little while ago. But the challenge is, to your point, Rich, your question was really just helping them understand the impact. Mm-hmm. Once I got them to understand how we made money, so that was a big check mark for me. So that was like, I felt like I was going to celebrate that alone, Mm-hmm. But then to help them understand how they affect that and in every part of the company, that's when the light went off and they went, oh, I mean, literally it was like, oh, yeah, okay. So that's why we do estimates. Okay. So that's why you're giving me the stink eye when I've got 10 hours on concepting when I was only given 5. Oh, and so they realized that. I will tell you, it was a really encouraging, and you could watch everybody literally stand up, like way more confident. For me, that was the best. The numbers came and that all turned out, but that was the best for me.
No, that's great. For the service companies that may be listening, were there any specific things that you can remember that you did to overcome that kind of, reluctance of learning the numbers? Was there some tricks or tips or hacks that you used to try to get people to really embrace it?
Yeah, well, for us, so yeah. And the simplest answer is, it's what you all taught me. I literally like followed it, because hey, look, I was not the most financially literate person either. I mean, I'm one of those, I'm not supposed to understand that, but when you're responsible for partly running the thing, you learn pretty quick how to manage the numbers. But so I followed the book, I followed the manual, I followed the rules, and we rolled it out as directed. And when we did, and I didn't try to jam everything down their throat in what I thought was going to scare them, it didn't. So we took it one step at a time. We introduced the problem. We all agreed on the one thing we could all attack together, meaning create a mini game around, understood what our critical number was and how we could affect it. And then we met I can't remember how often, if I'm honest, maybe it was weekly, I'm not sure, for our huddles, but what people started to realize was, not only were we affecting the number, playing the game, affecting the number, winning, people started to respond better to each other in terms of accepting help, offering help. It brought the culture tighter together. And that was, for me, that was a big bonus. Because we always believed that if the culture was strong and healthy in a positive way, that they could feel safe. And if they felt safe in my business, if I can't ask somebody to share all their creative vulnerabilities if they don't feel safe. They won't. They simply will not do it, right? They'll guard themselves. It's human nature. But the confidence that came in the fact that we were actually going to make money, and I wasn't going to get laid off, and we're doing fine, created this safety net. And the fact that they were helping each other, so there's empathy involved. It was a really wonderful dynamic happening. And it's honestly, if somebody would have told me before that the way to get that particular group to lighten up a lot was to help them be more financially literate, I would have said, you're crazy, honestly, right? But that's exactly what it did. And so the tricks or tips or whatever is like, follow the rule. Like you guys have this dialed in very well. And it works wonderfully for that group. They made their bonus that year for the first time in 4 years.
Great.
Yeah.
You mentioned the mini games, Doug, because as I recall, I'd go over to the network headquarters building, and I would see what was going on, the latest mini games and that sort of thing. And for creatives who are basically running from numbers, their whole life, and then they get in this situation, you're like, no, we can learn this. Some of the things that they did in mini games, like utilization, bill out percentages and things, I didn't even understand it because they had learned it so well. I remember a Target where they had these percentages. I'm like, I don't explain it to me again. I don't understand it. That shows the power of it, is that it can be very approachable. And when it's your number, it means something completely different than when it's Doug's number or Todd's number or somebody else's number, Dennis's number. And so you guys actually built a lot of value in the business as an ESOP. And then in 2015, you and your fellow employee owners sold to a large agency out on the West Coast. And this gave you an opportunity to start your own business, Austin Amplifies, and you help other agencies grow. You also recently published a book, which, by the way, I happened to see it debut at #1 in its category on Amazon. Congratulations on that. It's called Permission to Win: How to Grow Your Advertising Agency with Confidence. I wonder if you could talk about that, because I'm fascinated with the phrase permission to win. Can you share with our listeners what permission to win means?
You bet. I being on the business development and growth and innovation end of the field for the last 15 years of my agency career, it was always a challenge to say, all right, let's go after that brand. Let's go after that brand. Let's go after that brand. And I'd say, well, and I'll never forget it. When I arrived on the scene at Marlin, one of the things they wanted to do, one of the agencies, the one in particular I was just mentioning, they said, we want you to go get Indian Motorcycle for us. And I thought, wow, very cool brand. Everyone loves Indian Motorcycle. It's the underdog to the Harley. It's super cool. It was having a resurgence. It was awesome. And I thought, okay, like knowing full well, I'm going to do exactly nothing to try to go get Indian Motorcycle for these group of very, very talented food marketers. Okay. And that's the key phrase, right? So I said, okay, guys, I am positive I can get a phone call. What will you say when we get them on the phone? And they'll go, oh, well, we're going to tell them how much we love their brand. We're going to tell them how much, we can, like, we have these ideas for them for design, marketing. And I'm like, okay, great. And I'm just going to be, I might be a little bit of a butt here, but I'm going to go, like what? And the answer is, and I said, I'm going to stop you from embarrassing yourself, because the answer is you don't have anything to say to them except that you're excited about their brand, like most other people out there. I said, guys, we can't waste our time. We have no permission to win there. We have nothing of value to tell them other than our talent. And guess what? I'm sorry to tell you, and this is where they start throwing things at me, that the creativity has been commoditized over the years to the degree that I can get it for free and maybe better. So that's not the answer, okay? We have got to bring something of real value to the conversation before we really have permission to win it. And that's where it comes from, Steve. It's a posture that says, look, in a competitive space like advertising and advertising agencies and design and PR and all the communication group, right? There are, by the way, 120,000 of us in the United States, last count. That's a lot of competition. So from a competitive perspective, if I want to whittle down that competitive set to something more manageable, I've got to get a lot more specialized in what I have to do, right? And so what I mean by that is I take a vertical to focus on. In our case at the agencies, it was food. And in fact, it was business to business food. It was manufacturers to distributors to restaurants, very specific. And who would have thunk you could have created a global reach career out of being that finite? But we did, and employed a lot of people and did a lot of fun stuff. But the permission to win is not only a platform and a posture, but it's also a filter. Because when people would bring things like the Indian Motorcycle, which is a fun story to tell because it's so ridiculous in the context of a food marketing agency, is that if we don't think we have what it takes to bring real value and demonstrate expertise to the degree that we will be seen as a valuable partner versus a vendor, then don't waste your time. Because now you're competing on something other than value. You're competing on, oh, I don't know, looks, charisma, I don't know. But it certainly isn't the thing that is tied to margin.
Yeah.
I have a quick follow-up on that, because I think it's important for listeners that don't know you, Doug, to know exactly what this permission to win has done through the years, because if I'm not mistaken, you're responsible for being a big part of bringing global brands like Starbucks and Nestle and Unilever to Springfield, of all places, to do business. And I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the Starbucks was there, but yes. Yes. I tell you what, it's we're unlikely candidates for that level of work, aren't we, here in Springfield, Missouri? And it was so invigorating to be able to say, look, with focus and being deliberate about what we're doing, I had not only permission to win, but also permission to say no, right? And that's and that's where this permission to focus comes in, right? Mm-hmm. And that is, if we let ourselves say, let's go back to that 120,000 ad agency analogy. Regardless of your business and your vertical, you have competition. And so what's a good way to eliminate competition other than, doing things that we shouldn't do, right? Because we would never suggest that. But so let's fight fair. So if we're going to fight fair, and in the spirit of capitalism, it's a game. And so how do you win a game? Well, I'm going to reduce the size of the field. I'm going to reduce the size of the competitors. I'm going to take away their weapons. And the way we do that is being smarter than them first, more innovative, more relevant, all of that. Those are our tools. And so when we have those in line, because we've focused our efforts, we've decided the verticals we're going to invest and innovate in, and those are different things, to become the expert in those fields, then when something else like an Indian motorcycle opportunity shows up, I very confidently can say, hey, you know what? That's a really fantastic brand, but that's not our wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. Best of luck to you. In fact, let me introduce you to these great motorcycle marketing folks over here, because they'll do a great job for you. I'll just continue to admire your brand from afar. Thank you. And it's good. It's liberating to be able to say no, frankly. And it doesn't even have to be that drastic, to be honest, right? I mean, it can be, that focus has as much to do with staying in our lane vertically, business vertically, as it does within our sort of qualified prospect. And if we spend the time to really ratchet down what makes a great prospect versus a contact, right? So that's the difference. I have 100,000 contacts in my database, and those are all prospects. I go, not unless you're selling air. They're not. I mean, so let's ratchet that down a little bit. Let's get more finite, and the more finite we get, which is where some people have trouble with this, Steve. They say, "Well, Doug, I don't know. I mean, if I get that focused, right, then I'm missing opportunity." And I'm like, well, let's be honest. Okay. How many new clients can you handle? A couple hundred. That's a lot. Okay, good. Well, you're pointing your gun, and by the way, that shotgun you got in your hand, you're pointing it at about, you just said 10,000. You'll first of all, you'll choke on the response if we do it right, which we will, and we get them to respond. Whatever percentage of 10,000 is, you're still going to choke on it. You're going to have to then decide whether or not they have any money, time, or interest, right? And now you've deflected all of your energy for somebody who is truly already sort of vetted and qualified. You've worn yourself slick trying to convert somebody when all these people want to do is pay you. So I don't know. I am all for being the only advertising agency that is in food service, B2B, protein, college, university, private, under 5,000 people.
I love it.
Because you know what? There's one. And you know how many of those universities there are? 300. And guess what? If I'm the only answer, I get to win.
No, it's a great concept, Doug. And I can almost visualize the audience when you talk about more focus, them nodding, oh, that's what I need. I need more focus. We just had an opportunity to talk to about 50 of our practicing CEOs. And I asked them, which is more challenging right now in your business, finding opportunities or vetting the right opportunities? And 80% of them said it's vetting the opportunities and figuring out which one do we actually chase. Yeah. And I think what you're saying here is that if you can find that focus, and you can find specifically where you have permission to win, where your differentiation is really true and sets yourself apart, it can be very powerful. So great concept.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. It's, it to me, and I use the word liberating because it is, to be able to say no, especially when you're in the position where you have a lot of people expecting you to make the right decision on their behalf, whether it's 2 or 200 or 20,000. How do we know we're making the right decision for all the people that we're responsible for? Well, it can't just be a gut. It can't just be a feeling. We have to have more than that. And that's really what drove that, for me, discipline to get the prospecting part of it ratcheted down.
Could you talk just a little bit more about how a company would use a concept like permission to focus, and how they would go about practicing that?
Sure. So here we go. So oftentimes, so in our business, we're in the idea business. I like to say we're fountains of ideas. Like that's all day long. And people will get very excited and they go, Doug, I've got a great idea. And I'm like, nah, that's a good idea. Let's make it a great idea. Well, how do you make a good idea a great idea? You got to get rid of the other 10 good ideas and focus on one to make it great. And that's kind of the same way I approach the prospecting. So, for example, there are types of clients, regardless of what we do, really, whether it's heavy machinery manufacturing or restaurants or breweries or manufacturers or agencies or service companies. There are certain people that certain companies do the best with. They're the most valuable for, they're the most effective for, the people who see the outcome better. And so identify those and build that out into your prospecting persona. Let's build this very finite set of characteristics, and they include all kinds of things: psychographics, geographics, all kinds of things: size, ability, run rate, appetite for innovation, budget, timing, history, their clientele, our ability to affect it, all so many things. And it's a long list, you guys. I mean, it's pretty long. And then you have to set out to try to find them. And that's where the I don't know, magic. I don't know. That's where the fun part of the marketing journey comes in. Because now that I've identified this persona, this perfect prospect, now I've got to identify them, right? And they could be in big companies, little companies. They could be around the world. They could be wherever. So we got to identify them first, and then we have to make contact with them. So I've got to find a way to interrupt them in a way that catches their attention. And so the more finite I can get, the more I can speak just to them. I think we all can relate to getting many emails, unsolicited emails in our inbox every day that, profess to be the solution to every problem we've ever had. Like, I know I have a solution for you. To which I always wonder what problem they think I have, And if we don't understand that part of it, I don't think we can do it. And that's where I talk about the difference in my mind, that there's a difference between being a solution provider and a problem solver, right? And I prefer to be a problem solver approach than a solution provider. And the reason is, if I'm a solution provider, I've got this thing that is my solution fixer, and everything I go after is what I use it for. That old saying that to the guy with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, as opposed to, right, the carpenter that says, I don't think we even need a nail. I think we can tongue and groove that thing, So if I don't understand what you're doing first, I can't help you. And so the focus on trying to identify that prospect right? And then identify that industry that they're in, the vertical, right? So I've got the perfect prospect in the vertical that I understand well, because I understand the business of their business. And that's a term I use a lot. If we understand the business of their business, and I understand that that's the type of person I want to talk to, I can jump into a very meaningful conversation, presumably on first meetup, right? And I would always tell people, the strategy for trade shows and things like this. So it transfers into everything we do. Our inbound, sort of the magnet that we're going to use to get them included into our community. The outbound, how I'm going to reach out to connect with them and intersect with them. The interpersonal industry relations, if you will. It manifests all the way down to, I think we can all relate to this if we've been in business for any amount of time and we attend a trade show or a convention or a summit or something, and we're at the networking mixer thing, and it's pretty traditional. We got our big name badge on, everybody's smiling big and saying hi and how's your business and all that. And but waiting online for a gin and tonic behind somebody and striking up a conversation and can't be, what's your biggest pain point? It's like, oh, come on. Like, I don't know you. I'm not going to tell you that, right? But if I could jump in and say, hey, I know you guys there at McCormick do a lot of spices, and I got to tell you, man, if I'm you, I'm wondering what's going on in the K-12 system with this new sodium mandate. That's got to be putting a hurt on you guys. What are y'all doing about that? All of a sudden, and by the way, I don't know anything about sodium mandates in schools other than it's a very, very big topic once upon a time, probably still is. So guess what? I've got something really relevant to actually kick around with this person. That's because I took the time to focus in on them, on that vertical, and I understand the business of their business. So it's mostly that, Rich, but for me it goes really deep, right? So it goes all the way down to, what am I going to talk about when I meet somebody?
Very practical. I like it.
So we're talking
I suppose it is.
Yeah. Permission to focus, permission to win. Both of these mindsets would be really helpful and beneficial to people outside of just advertising. Have you adapted your philosophy, your approach outside of a creative agency? And maybe you could give us an example of that, or maybe talk about what adaptations of it are necessary to make it work.
Sure. No, I have, and it's been fun, by the way. So let's see. I have done work for senior living land developers. Now, that's interesting, right? That was interesting how we adapted it to that. Restaurants, other business consulting firms, breweries, research firms, consumer research and insight firms, food manufacturers, beverage manufacturers. Yeah. So kind of, that's a decent breadth, I think. And what it does is, once we start to sort of adopt this posture of permission to win and why we need to think about things that way. So for example, product development inside of a food manufacturer, and they see an opportunity in the marketplace for something in a dry good canned space, but they're a frozen pizza manufacturer today. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's a bit of a stretch. It's a whole different part of the store from a retail experience. It's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different shopping experience. It's a whole different litany of things, right?
Logistics and everything.
Everything. And so I say, why do we want to be in the canned bean space? Like, you have some burning desire for legumes or something? What is it, And by the time we get through it, we realize that we have no permission there. Our brand will not translate to that space. It's unbelievable. And by unbelievable, I mean, lose money, not going to buy it. Distributors are going to laugh you out of the house. You won't get the shelf space you want. So why do that? Why call Indian Motorcycle? right? Like it just doesn't fit. If we're going to can something, why don't we can the pizza sauce that everybody loves about your pizza, or the cheese or the crust, or something, the most leverageable equity of your current brand posture is where we should start. It's got to have a reason for being, right? Mm-hmm. So that's just an example of a product development scenario. And yeah,
we just got to get over ourselves and say, hey, you know what makes most sense? Dang it if it isn't common sense again, Rich.
Yeah.
We run into this a lot, Doug.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and I can be, that comes across as a big buzzkill sometimes, because they go, well, you're just a dream killer. If I want to be in the canned bean business, by golly, you can't stop me. And I'm thinking, well, that's awesome, but let's really decide what kind of measurement of success we're going to have. You're going to sell one can of beans and you're happy, or do you want to try to make $1 million or $100 million or whatever it might be? So, yeah, I mean, I'm while I am a, like, I don't know, reckless optimist and super open to trying anything, at the end of the day, there's a passion driven thing and there's a business decision that has to be made. And the business decision usually is the thing that keeps me from spending not only my money, but somebody else's money if I don't think they can win with it. Yeah.
What makes me think that that comes from a lot of bumps and bruises and scars from doing this for the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah. There's a few times I had to go to the how come room and I had no real good answer, except I thought it was a good idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I got a big question for you, Doug, but I got a sense that you maybe where you're going to go with this, but what kind of piece of advice would you give leaders? What piece of advice would you give leaders that are trying to kind of change the game in their industry?
That's a great question. Well, I think the value and power of objectivity around one's own scenario or situation is very valuable. So my advice would be, seek out a trusted advisor, whether it's a personal friend or other, and ask them before you go do something like that. Get advice, be open to it, be coachable, be vulnerable. We can't see what's going on in our own business sometimes because we're in it so deep. I think that's, everybody can relate to that at some point. And yet sometimes we forget to sort of stand back and look at it objectively and say, oh my gosh, I want this to work so badly that I continue to invest and reinvest and reinvest and reinvest when I need to stop. Like I need to give it up. Right? How can I maintain my relevance without reinventing? Because sometimes it's laying right in front of us, and it takes an outside perspective sometimes to help bring that to bear. And, coming from an industry that is literally driven by collaboration and open and honest dialogue that sometimes looks like disagreement and sometimes looks like fighting, but most often looks like a lot of fun if we do it right and we create the right environment. I can't help but fall back on that as being just a cornerstone of the platforms and the perspective that I have, is that, seek that outside perspective and be open to it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get some positivity. I love that. Well, Doug, we always wrap up our podcast by asking this question, which is, what is the one question we should be asking you?
What's the one question you should be asking me? Oh boy. That's a good one. Maybe you should be asking me, how does running an ad agency correlate with how to run I don't know, pick one of your verticals, any one of them: construction, manufacturing, Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because there probably is even a tighter run, which would be a challenge for me, and I would love that, right? Like if you said, Doug, tell me how your career in advertising relates to this healthcare vertical that we're trying to break into. Like,
Great.
you know, like that'd be fun for me. But
delve in and do the process, right? Because really at the core of it, you're probably going to tell me the same thing that you would tell the bean company or the pizza company is, hey, you know, why is an oncologist doing, you know, plastic surgery or something? I don't know.
right.
We might have
That's
a
it.
bad example there, but
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, and it's yeah. So maybe that.
So I'm getting a ton of good takeaways here. First of all, permission to win, permission to focus, permission to say no, permission to be great. I even kind of took this as an inference, permission to get paid, because you mentioned sometimes you had to say no because these people just didn't have the money.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
and then a big takeaway for me is that focus does not mean myopic. You're still aware of what's going on and adjacencies, but you're staying focused through discipline, not through ignorance. I love that.
Yes.
Problem solver versus solution provider. What are you going to talk about with this person? You know, this perfect prospect, and I feel like I've gotten a lot out of this, and I think everyone listening could benefit from just a little bit of focus, especially in crazy times like right now when people and supply chain are in such a mess, and who knows what the demand is going to do. And, you know, it's going to explode, obviously. And how do we not choke on it? That's my final takeaway. How do we not choke on the business that's coming our way? So Doug's new book is Permission to Win, How to Grow Your Advertising Agency with Confidence. And Doug, Austin, what a pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you both. Always a pleasure to talk to both you guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Doug.
Well, let's keep the conversation going. Be sure to send us your questions, your stories, your best practices, ideas, your challenges, and your victories. That is capitalism at its best. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.